Okay, so good morning and welcome to the first session of the 2020 Spark Forum. And I understand that this year there are over 1,400 people signed up to attend this industry conference, and that's a record. Franklin Templeton has been a longtime sponsor and supporter of Spark, and we thank Jenny Johnson for your support, and thank you for being here as the opening keynote speaker, and we hope to see you virtually soon. First of all, congratulations on being named the CEO of Franklin Templeton late last year and having successfully completed one of the largest mergers in the asset management industry on July 31st to form a $1.4 trillion behemoth. And you accomplished all that, Jenny, this during a once-in-a-century pandemic. All I can say is wow. In 1947, your grandpa started the firm and named it after Benjamin Franklin to perpetuate the twin values of frugality and prudence when it came to saving and investing. So fast forward 7 decades, and as the fourth Johnson to lead, what are your guiding principles for the company in the 21st century? Hello, Jenny. As the Milton Friedman style of shareholder-centric liberal capitalism is being questioned?
Well, first of all, I have to laugh because if there's one thing that we all had to learn in the work from home is we have suddenly become our own desktop support. It's amazing what we've learned to have to do in the last few months. But first of all, let me just say thank you to Spark for inviting me to this event, and Philip, to you for really your 30 years of service to the retirement industry. I mean, there's probably few things in society that matters more than people being able to retire with dignity, because if they don't, that falls on the rest of society. So just thank you for all your commitment and dedication to that. It's interesting, when this whole concept of shareholder or stakeholder capitalism came in, I was skeptical because I feel like, my father always taught that you take care of the client and the stock price takes care of itself, right? So you don't focus on profits ever. You don't focus on what your stock's doing today. You focus on taking care of all your stakeholders, because the only way you sustain a business over the long run is if you do those things, and you're taking care of your employees, you're ensuring a healthy, diverse environment of your employees, you're taking care of your clients, your community that you live. There's an expectation of corporations. We've always been very engaged in our community. And then finally, I would say that the vendors if you didn't treat your suppliers well, they weren't going to be your suppliers. So I found it like, well, this is the way we've always operated, because if you're focusing on the long-term sustainability of a company, you have to think about those things. And I think maybe in history where that fell off is when the true costs of things like climate change. I mean, I spent some time in Montana. One of the big issues Montana has is the old mining companies didn't incorporate in their costs the cost of cleanup, and now that's fallen on the citizens to do. So I think as we've gotten more focused on things like sustainability and environmental sustainability and diversity and inclusion of our staff, that those actually are all important to running a business. It's just that it wasn't, the light wasn't shown on those things. And so I feel like, again, that we've always operated this company for the long term. I think maybe a CEO operates quarter to quarter, maybe not as focused on those things. But if you're really thinking about long-term sustainability of the business, you have to include all of those factors. And I think Milton Friedman would agree.
Well, I think Milton was really talking about a longer term. I think it's misquoted sometimes, but it's sort of back in fashion to start talking about Milton again. So it is so refreshing to hear from you, Jenny, as a CEO of a public company. The refreshing part is not about what you are thinking now, which everybody seems to be talking about, ESG and sustainability, but it's really refreshing to think about that is something that you have strong conviction to for years, not just today fashionable. So thank you for saying it, and thank you for saying it publicly, and to continue to be an advocate for those things that's near and dear to humankind, actually. Let's spend a little bit more time on this. So COVID-19 has been a disruptor, right, to countless businesses, families, and communities. And this course-changing long-term impact on our behavior, our psyche, and our economy is still unknown. However, what is clear is the pandemic has been an accelerator for many trends, one of which, of course, you said that we are all our own helpers in making our computers work. The most obvious is adopting and consuming more technology in our everyday lives, case in point. I understand you are a connoisseur with a big C of technology. So please share with all of us what and how you see fintech, tokenization, deep learning, 5G, on, may be used by Franklin Templeton in reaching its mission in the next decade.
So, I mean, I think that, my 30 plus years in this industry, we've never experienced change like we're experiencing now. And, there are things like COVID and work from home and, people sometimes are focusing the trends and saying, well, that's because of these things. These trends existed. That just accelerated it. Just like e-commerce accelerated. But it wasn't that this was a new trend that was going on. And so, I look at things like the work from home environment. I think it's here to stay. I think you're going to have a hybrid approach and it's really because of the enablement of the video conferencing and the technology around connectivity globally. I think that from a talent standpoint, companies are going to have to be more accommodating to their own employees. And some employees are going to look at the commuting and saying, I'm not going to commute 90 minutes anymore. I'll do it a couple of days a week. So I think that part, we had already experienced that trend of Franklin Templeton because as a company with 100 offices in 35 countries, you had to use video conferencing, so it was easy for us to shift to this environment. But there's other very significant technological trends that are going to impact our business. I think in the kind of more, I'll call it medium term, but it's a short medium term, which is just AI and the massive data. If you're an active manager, you are going to have to leverage data insights from non-traditional sources. It used to be that the analysts would build their model and they have their own proprietary inputs here or there. Now you're going to have to look at things like social sentiment, and that includes things like governance, treatment of employees, carbon footprint, and green energy. All of those things are massively stored in data, and an analyst is going to have to build models around that. So I think that the data analytics and the insights is going to be very important from an investment standpoint. I also think, tokenization and blockchain is going to be significant in, one, I think in how we run our back offices, and two, in unlocking historically illiquid assets and actually making them more democratized for others to be able to participate in them. So those are kind of the big trends that I think we're going to see with technology.
Fantastic. We'll come back. I'd love to spend more time on that because we can certainly learn a lot from you. You are on the front line, really thinking about the future, thinking about how you use technology to integrate not only how to deal with your stakeholders, but really how do you make better investment decisions so the outcome can be better. So maybe we can come back to that a little bit. You mentioned about tokenization is one of my favorite things, actually. So last fall, favorite doesn't mean I know anything about it, just my favorite. Last fall, Franklin Templeton made a preliminary SEC filing to start a blockchain-based government money market fund, which, of course, you know. And when launched, it will be the first to use a public blockchain, I think it's a Stellar network, to record the ownership of shares, right? And so shareholders can then purchase or redeem shares of this money market fund through a mobile app. Everything is on mobile. Will this be the path? And this is a question. You didn't tell me the answer. I'm just asking and hope that you can share. Franklin Templeton did disintermediate banks through a digital wallet ultimately to conduct commerce in a similar manner as a debit card. So let's say I have this. a phone, and I have your app and digital wallet, I can actually go to Safeway or Ralph and say, hey, I want to buy grocery. Because it's blockchain, I can actually use your money market to buy it and actually not pay any debit card fees or credit card fees. I'm injecting suggestions into this conversation. Is that the kind of future you are thinking, and then how we ultimately have other asset management products into this type of a digital wallet through tokenization?
Yeah, no, so there's a lot in that, and I would say a couple things. So I think blockchain is huge for our industry, and what we're doing on the money market is kind of a tip of the iceberg. And so describing it is exactly what you said. Now let's remember, money markets disintermediated banks' deposit accounts, right? That was the big issue in the 70s. Money markets could pay high interest rates. Banks were limited. That's what basically ignited. That was a catalyst for the mutual fund industry when people started to wake up because of money market funds. So what we decided to do is we said, you know what, I'm not a big fan of Bitcoin, only in that ultimately governments, if Bitcoin ever becomes massive, and I think it's got its place, but governments need to control their currency. If you look at the strains in the EU, it's frankly because countries like Greece can't depreciate their currency, and companies like Germany get the benefit of kind of the average for the euro, and theirs would be appreciated when their economies do well. So it's very difficult to not be able to control your currencies. It's the way that you can, help your economy when it's struggling. So that's the Bitcoin world, and so my view is if Bitcoin gets really big, ultimately you're going to start to see some regulations where countries want to pull it back. That is not to say that I don't think countries will express their currency in blockchain. I think for a lot of compelling reasons that may happen. So why did we do the money market? We think that there's a great opportunity for a stable coin, right? A stable coin backed and regulated, right? The other stable coins that have been out there and discussed aren't regulated, and I think that becomes a problem. And so it was natural for us to say, let's take a money market and make that a stable coin. And then interestingly, one of the challenges with traditional money markets is if you had investors making small transactions, you couldn't settle them. It was hard because you had these big instruments that you were invested in. But now imagine that you don't actually have to redeem the fund. It's the coin itself just circulates, right? And so you can actually bring down the redemption and purchase, the redemption amount, because you're not going to have so many redemptions back and forth with the money market fund. So that was one of our compelling reasons, and you're absolutely right. You can imagine you walk into a store and be able to choose, I'll pay with my Franklin Templeton money market, or I'll pay with my credit card, that's at the payment system. So I think that's absolutely where this can go. And then for us, it was also ensuring, sometimes you have to have an objective to be able to drive your organization to understand and really learn the technology. And because we think blockchain is so significant in potentially in our industry, it was a way for us to rally around the learnings that come out of blockchain.
So it's a test case for you for much more to come, sounds like, if it is go the direction you want.
Yes, I would say that's right.
And I'm so glad you spend time on the difference between Bitcoin and digital currency, because sometimes people get confused. They are two the same, but they are not. So I appreciate. Thank you very much for that. Let's take a little time and talk about how many financial services firms have merged and acquired. Of course, I mentioned earlier that the big deal that you did, which I continue to applaud you for all the effort, and I'm sure you continue to spend time in making it work well for you and your shareholders and stakeholders. So many financial service firms merged and acquired to bring in more assets under management. That's the typical reason that people do it, and to build scale and to improve the bottom line. Why did you decide to acquire Legg Mason, and how does this acquisition fit into your overall vision for Franklin Templeton in this is the loaded question, in an AI-enabled winner-takes-all world?
I think for us, look, I do think that scale is going to matter in this industry, but we didn't do it for scale. We truly did it because we felt it was a growth story. It filled in gaps that we felt we had. So whether it was product gaps, capabilities, things like real scale in core and core plus fixed income, which we got with Western, more alternatives. We think that there's one is you certainly see institutions who are moving more into alternatives. We don't think that trend necessarily reverses even when interest rates, even if rates go back up. And then we think that there's an opportunity, and I actually think this is where tokenization comes in a bit, of democratizing some of those alternative asset classes. And so we just felt that we needed to have more capability in that. It also brought us diversification of products. We had been 75% retail, 25% institutional. Now we're 50-50. That just helps you build a more sustainable business. And then things like separately managed account, SMAs. You see a trend in the retail channel to more individualized accounts. We think that the dollar of SMAs is going to come down, the dollar minimum requirement. And so that's going to be an important area for us. And Legg Mason they were number 3 in that space. And so that was important capability. So we looked at it as this fills in great growth for us, great growth opportunity for us. But I also think the scale is not insignificant because if I look at Franklin Templeton, think of us as the manager of boutique investment teams that are completely independent on the strength of a $1.4 trillion platform where we can invest in technology. We can invest in AI and share that data across these investment teams. Data is really expensive, and we think that for active managers in the future, those who have the biggest and deepest data lakes and then the best, creativity around their algorithms to gain insights are going to be the ones that win. And so if you can share that cost across more investment teams, that's going to be an advantage over time. It's just going to be harder for the smaller managers to keep up with that kind of thing.
Jenny, you have absolutely a global platform. In fact, goes back to the days of Templeton when you acquired it and merged and so on. How are you seeing your view? I don't want to call it U.S. view, but your view sitting in the U.S. But you have offices all around the world, and they have all different regulations. They have all different things going on. How do you think about that, and how do you execute a global strategy when it is so many invisible border but yet obvious borders out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because I can tell you that that one of the challenges is sometimes you have conflicting regulation, where if you comply with one, you really have a problem with another. And so, in all honesty, again, that's having the resources of that $1.4 trillion platform, because the amount you end up spending in compliance and to comply with various regulations in various markets, and sometimes having to replicate what you do to make sure you comply is not insignificant. And it also makes it harder and harder for others who haven't moved into this space to actually come in. So in some ways, it gives you a runway advantage, but it's complicated. And, you try to spend a lot of time and have good relationships with regulators such that you can talk to them as regulations coming in so they understand the impact. I mean, regulators genuinely come at it with trying to do what's right for shareholders, but don't always understand the unintended consequences, which many don't. I mean, and so you have to spend time to build that trusted relationship with the regulators, and you work with them on understanding those. And we spend a lot of time trying to do that.
So one of the things that in our industry, and when I say our, we are at Spark, so we deal with a lot of record keepers. And record keeping industry is not unique to merger acquisition as well, as you know, and I won't name names. We all know who have bought what and who is courting whom. It's all about in that industry. In this industry of ours is also very much about scale, because the cost of doing business hasn't come down. In fact, you need to invest, as you know very well, and have to have the deep pocket to do it. But at the same time, the revenue per head is coming down, either because of fiduciary rules or because it's just a compression and all the other things. So ultimately, we are all really dealing with one commodity, is data. right? At the end of the day, we're going to differentiate ourselves is, do we know our customers? Do we know how we're going to create product solutions and services that can meet the need of the client and ultimately meet the outcome that they desire? Do you see that basically we are going into a world that we're going to have a fewer and fewer and fewer players, and really just have a few dominant players, because they're the only ones left who can even do the type of thing we're talking about? And so on one hand, we want freedom. I mean, we started from, proprietary products, then we go into open architecture. That is still sort of the thing of today. Post-fiduciary world, I myself see open architecture being yesterday's discussion. Tomorrow's discussion is more like yesterday's, which is more accumulated to a few hands. How do you think about this juxtaposition between choice and scale?
It's an interesting question, right? Because in the end, clients want customization. And there's plenty of studies that talk about if you can customize specifically to your client's needs, they are going to have much greater loyalty. And so, the challenge with that is it's a data issue, as you correctly identified, and data is expensive. So to be able to gather that on information and then build customized solutions for clients is probably going to be who's a winner. And do clients want to feel like there's choice in open architecture, but they really want to know, am I achieving my goal? And that's actually their focus. I think as an industry, we've probably gotten, as the asset management side as opposed to record keeping, we get so focused on measuring ourselves around things like benchmarks, which in the end, that means absolutely nothing to our clients. They want to know, do I have enough money to retire when I want to retire or not? Right? Just tell me that. And
absolutely.
And so I think that building solutions that are customized is going to be important, and the challenge is going to be, from an investment standpoint, is going to be, now you've added in this component of not just I want to retire, but I actually want my investment capabilities to do good. And that's this, that where you have the ESG overlay. Now, they want it to do good, but not achieve their retirement, not at the expense of their retirement. So the two have to go hand in hand, right? ESG has to be viewed as investment risk to achieve those goals. But I also think if we can describe the retirement with ESG, we actually can get younger people engaged in investing, right? I want to do good. I want to help, in climate change. I'm concerned about it. If I invest now, am I helping towards those things? So I think as an industry, there's opportunity with that customization to kind of to drive purpose in that. And they're going to be a little bit less concerned about, did you go with this, do I have the broad, open architecture of asset manager? And I say that that's not necessarily a good thing for me as an asset manager. I think the challenge as an asset manager is, how do you provide those types of investment vehicles? And I think things like blockchain are going to be important in that component. And then I'm just going to make one other comment that is what keeps me up at night and others, is you look at industrial revolutions, rarely do the incumbents come out doing well. Why? Because we incrementally improve what we do, and it's the person who has nothing to lose that comes in and disrupts. And so when you think about a record-keeping platform, for example, it becomes hard for a record keeper to redesign their platform for customization on blockchain, which you could argue may be cheaper over time, but is an expensive capital investment today. But somebody as a disruptor might be able to do that and be able to take those assets. And so we all have to manage this balance of investing in our own disruption while also incrementally improving our business. And it's not an easy thing to do.
It's a balancing act all the time. I get it. We may come back and address that in a little bit. I'm going to, you opened up a direction that I was going to go, so I'm going to ask you the next question. So Roger Ferguson, he's CEO of TIA, and recently he spoke about 3 risks facing American workers. In fact, I think I heard you spoke on Bloomberg similar, so I'm going to just rephrase it. The first is the savings gap, which is basically undersaved. And that's been a phenomenon for years. The second one is the lifetime income gap of living too long, which we're kind of talking about. And then finally, the security gap is not only living too long, is basically having income certainty, right? So over a decade ago, JP Morgan, when they were still in the record-keeping business, marketed their record-keeping participant engagement services under the banner of, I thought this is a great term, audience of one, right? Audience of one, to emphasize the customization of solution to each participant, which you are kind of alluding to earlier. IT and computing power enables firms to personalize now financial solutions to improve the attainment of these desired outcomes. So let's stay in the DC plan for a moment. I know we should broaden this discussion a little bit after. What are your thoughts in creating individualized solutions to not only assist those who are in the top 5%, that's easy, right? The top 5% got all the money, and that's what everybody want to go after. But all workers, really, and those especially who have undersaved and left behind economically. How do you think about that as you design your products, as you embrace technology to find really beyond product, really into solutions? What are some of the things that you've been thinking about you can share with us?
So I'm going to say two things. So one is the customization of the product, and then I just want to point out one thing that we cannot forget, which is we need people to save earlier, right? You know, if somebody saves $5,000 a year between the age of 25 and 35 and stops saving from there versus somebody who saves for 30 years $5,000 a year from 35 to, you know, whatever that 65 or something, you have more money if you saved in those 10 years earlier. So we cannot forget, it is on all of us to engage a younger generation to get them thinking about savings. It's going to be critical to start their retirement planning when you never think you should ever be. You're just worried about getting a job. You're not thinking about your retirement. So that's, I think, a really important piece of this. And then the types of things that we're thinking about in a managed account. Look, I think the good news is technology is going to provide, it's democratizing what was historically just available to the ultra-high net worth, right? It was, the ultra-high net worth had much more tax-efficient savings. Now retirement plans are tax-efficient, but, more customization. They had access to, private investments, which because of the illiquidity premium tend to have higher returns. Well, in a retirement account, liquidity is not quite as important as, maybe an investment account that you keep. So what we're thinking about is how can you solve with a managed account, maybe incorporate some of these private assets, maybe even use things like an annuity as part of that, where you ensure that security of longevity, and maybe that's a pooled annuity, so only those who really live a long time end up accessing the annuity, but everybody's contributed to that insurance kind of program, and that is bundled in a managed individual account. And that managed individual account, and again, this is a bit down the road, right? Because it's hard to, you don't have the technology quite there today. You see it already as we move into more collective investment trusts. Like there's more flexibility in the CIT, and I think 30% of retirement assets are now in CITs. So I just think that we're going to continue to move into those vehicles where ultimately you're going to see more and more people literally have their own personalized retirement account that's going to incorporate some of these features and have some private assets and maybe an insurance component to try to address some of those other issues. But we got to get them saving earlier too.
So you are an asset manager, and you build solutions and products to satiate specific reasons, or maybe slotting into a portfolio. I know it's been very true, it's continued to be true that Franklin Templeton has always relied on intermediaries, advisors, consultants to reach the end client. And there are other firms that says, gee, advisor consultants are great, and we want them, but we also want to reach the end client as well. So there's a bit of a race. I don't mean you, but there's a bit of a race, or at least a conscious discussion about how do we get to the results that we're looking for. And I understand from other conversation I've had with wonderful folks at your firm that are looking to aid the intermediaries, people like myself, advisors and consultants, to do a better job, to allow us to be more efficient in what we do, so that you end up helping the end client, whomever the participants are. Can you talk a little bit about your vision about that, and how you come around to thinking that way? Really, it's a little bit outside asset management almost, right? I mean, it's not your traditional, I'm going to create a mutual fund and I want you to come buy it. So can you share a little bit of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so first of all, we are, at our core, we believe the end client is better served with the customization and personalization of the financial advisor. Because there are stated needs that an advisor can draw out as they understand the individual that a robo-advice can't completely. Having said that, I actually would say we would be willing to go direct if it meant getting people in earlier who the advisor will not necessarily pay attention to because it's just not scalable for their business, right? How do you get them in earlier, and then as they make their savings, shift them to an advisor? So we actually think that there's opportunity there. So as I mentioned earlier, I think that what was preserved for the ultra high net worth, technology is enabling that to be delivered through a financial advisor in mass scale. So what does the high net worth client get? They get tax efficiency, a customized portfolio that has, frankly, you can have ESG components. I want gender equality. I want to move the dial on that, right? So include that in mind. And a high net worth, manager will build portfolios of those specifically. They want trust and estate planning, right? So that comes in there. They want education of their heirs. So to the extent now and they want, of course, financial planning. So what used to be the financial advisor's role is, here's the investment portfolio, manage my investments. When the world kind of went fee-based, the client said, whoa, I'm not going to pay you that much. And frankly, passive has sort of made that even more of a challenge with it outperforming a lot of active. I don't think that stays there, but outperforming active in this very momentum market. And so the client's like, well, I'm paying you every month. What else are you doing for me? And it's forcing that financial advisor, which is a good thing, to truly be more of a financial planner, right? And so what we're investing in are tools that helps that advisor be more of a financial planner. We have a product, our goals optimization engine, and the concept behind it is, historically, the blunt instrument was, let me interview you. Now I understand your risks. I'll give you an investment portfolio. What our goals optimization engine does, and it's a cloud-based service that can get built into anybody's investment platform that an advisor uses, but it understands to say, well, Philip, you have three goals. You want to retire, and that, no question, you have to have enough money to retire. Number two, if there's some extra, you'd like to help your kids go to college, that's a 20-year deal. You want that goal. And by the way, if you really do well, you'd like that house on the beach. That second home on the beach would be great, right? But the first goal, as long as you're tracking, you can roll your savings almost in a waterfall into the next two goals. But your investment risk, like you have to be able to manage that retirement appropriately as you get close to retirement, whereas you might have to just go guns blaring on the second home on the beach because you're either going to get it or you're not. And so your investment appetite is going to be much more aggressive there because you're not going to get it if you don't, right? And so building the customized portfolios and it enables the advisor to have a conversation with the client about what it actually means to the client. The client's not sitting there saying, did you beat the benchmark last quarter? They're saying, how am I doing on my path to achieving these goals? And how are you customizing my investment portfolio based on my need to get to those goals?
So I see the way you are thinking. I think the way you are thinking is really there are different goals, of course. There's some is inside retirement, some the outside, like buying the house on the beach. Buying the house on the beach, quite frankly, it was more affordable before COVID than now because everybody's moving to the beach. So I didn't meet my goal because of COVID. So I'm thinking the convertibility between what's in-plan solution and out-of-plan solution. So I've always thought that, hey, if this is a good, let's just use managed account. If this is a good managed account solution in plan, this will be a great solution when I leave plan. So this whole portability is not just about, in my opinion, what Secure Act talks about annuity, which you mentioned, which could and should play a part, but really also the solution has to be also versatile enough, because if it was good for me for 30 years in plan, when I leave, my goals still need to be accomplished. So let's take that sort of whatever solution it is out of plan. And I think that has been a bit of a challenge, the inconsistency throughout my life, that I'm not getting the same kind of uniform way of thinking that I'm familiar with, that I have planned all my life. How do you think about that part? Is that something that you all are concerned about, to provide that continuity?
For sure, and that also is tied into a bit to who's providing the advice when you're in plan. And if you're sort of kicked out of the plan, not kicked out, but you graduate or whenever you were, right?
Yes.
And you suddenly lost that advice component, then you've asked people to suddenly have a skill set that they've never developed because they didn't rely on it. And so, again, this is where that transition is so important, that, we go from understanding that people, that there has to be some continuity of advice in that process. Or you build a product that, and many, as we know, many of our target dates were designed to get you to retirement, and then you sort of graduated and you had to do whatever you were going to do. The alternative is, you say you're creating a managed product that even goes through the decumulation stage and is designed to carry you on through that. So I think there's sort of two ways to handle it. One is to make sure that you get continuity of advice, and the other is you actually build products with the intention of transitioning them into the out-of-plan environment.
Before I ask the next question, I have been dominating questions, which I enjoy very much, but I'm told not to dominate. So I would like to let everyone and whomever is watching, hopefully many, many, many people, if you have questions, please text those questions in, and we will field it to Jenny to answer them to the best of our collective ability. Seeing none, I'm going to keep dominating questions so far. So Jenny, being at Spark, I know you know the record-keeping business well. What are some of the things that you would suggest to our industry? Not to do better or worse, but what are some of the things that you think that we should be mindful of from a record keeper standpoint first, and then we'll ask you the same question about advisor, consultant, and so on. What are some of the things that you would like to share with us about our industry?
I guess I think that I think we just all have to, from a technology standpoint, accept two things. One is there's going to be a demand for much greater customization and expectation of much better customization, which means you as the record keeper have to know the client, or you're going to have to know more and more about them, because they're just going to expect that you know it about them. And so that's going to be critical. And then number two, just digital access, and those things can go a little bit hand in hand, but I think that clients are, the younger generation, their expectation of just how easy and quickly and through all different means can access information. I think that trend is going to continue. It's hard, right? It's hard, particularly, as I mentioned, if you're in a lower margin business, to make those investments. And we're just in that sort of hockey stick of requirement of investments to stay up on the digitalization. Otherwise, we get disrupted. But I would say that there's just going to be a massive expectation of clients for really customized solutions.
How much do you feel that getting the young people involved, which you have repeatedly stated how important sort of the magic of compound interest. Getting started early is really the magic. How do you think about gamification and all that play in a role, or maybe ultimately? I know there are other firms, one firm, I won't name names here, but particularly interested in virtual reality, which is something that I'm also passionate about. I think that I'm going to share that, this virtual reality is something that we can experience, not the past me, not the present me, but about the future me. And going through that experience, we get to learn about what the future could be like. Which is a rarity, right? I mean, we don't get to do that on a day-to-day basis, but through virtual reality to paint a picture for us. What's your thought about that in helping perhaps younger generation through gamification, through VR and that type of thing, to engage them on a record-keeping standpoint so that all of our expectation can be realized?
I have to laugh, Philip, because my kids got me into the Oculus, and I jokingly tell them that I'm close to being a Jedi Knight level 47 on my. And while I joke about it, because it actually is really fun, I have to say, I intentionally do those types of things for fear that I become out of touch with what the opportunities in that next generation is. And I can see easily people holding board meetings. As a matter of fact, I know a company that did during COVID where everybody wore a VR, and they had the normal boardroom, but everybody was in their home. And so I actually think these are important things to understand because they're coming. But anyway, to answer your question, we actually did a partnership with a company called Razer, which is one of the largest gaming companies in Singapore. And what Razer figured out is that they have their users buy access, as you do in gaming, from various things. And they have to put money in. So they said, well, why don't we become a bit of a bank and a wealth manager, right? So we're their wealth manager on that platform. You have to think about it as a new almost distribution channel. And the reason it's so important and exciting is if, again, you can get that younger generation engaged in saving earlier, and it's in a non-threatening environment because they're comfortable with the gaming, then we are all better off because of that compounding interest by getting them starting that saving early. So I think it is very important to engage. And again, I think we as an industry have to remember most of the people didn't grow up loving stock market, loving thinking about investing. It's actually scary to them. And so if we can present it in such a way that it's engaging and non-threatening, and I think gaming is one way to do that, then we should do it.
I'll be there to help you. There are some questions came out, and because there are quite a few questions, so I see if we can do some lightning round. Is not the right way, but to see if we can try to answer as many questions as possible. One question came. It says, what are your observations regarding the potential expansion of the U.S. type retirement savings and investment overseas to Europe and to Asia? So really thinking about defined contribution type of thing. Is your firm involved in working with in other jurisdiction in the DC expansion, or if you can share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, so absolutely, it is something that we're focused on. And you have to be able to be flexible with various cultures and kind of regulatory environments. So you can't just say this is the plan and this is what works. You have to kind of understand how it fits in. But it is absolutely something we're very engaged in, and because again, we think it's important for every country, every culture to get people retiring early or saving early. Otherwise, it falls on society to have to come up with a solution. So we think it's important, and we're very engaged in it.
Very good. Another question came in. This is one of those prediction questions, so we won't hold you to the prediction, but we'd love to know your prediction. How do you think retirement plan will be different 5 years from now, and what do you need to do to work on today to be ready for them? So I assume retirement plan is really thinking about not only the plan, but really servicing the plan as well. So maybe give some thought to both of those directions.
I think, again, I think you're going to have more customization. I think that the default option will evolve. We'll look back at target date as a little bit of a blunt instrument. It did a great job as far as, kind of defining it, but the opportunity to have a more sophisticated kind of managed account approach that includes things like private assets. I mean, if you look at it, we have 50% of the public companies on the stock exchange that we had in the 70s, right? I mean, and the problem is because companies are waiting longer, that growth cycle is being captured by the private market, not the public market, which means that the average person doesn't have access to that. Well, the perfect place to play getting private assets to the mass affluent or just the masses is through retirement, because you can deal with that illiquidity premium and not have it as pressured as much, but it's still going to have to be in a managed account. Like it's kind of that running with scissors. If you just made a private account as an option and somebody says, well, I'm going all in, they may not understand the consequences of that. So I think it's in a kind of a managed device type of vehicle, and I think we're just going to see a greater sophistication for that.
So if I may restate something that you have stated and tell me if I'm reflecting correctly. If I'm not, please tell me that. From what I'm hearing, you haven't said one thing about product today. There isn't one word about product. You've been talking about solutions. You've talked about managed account. Managed account is not a product. It's a solution. It's a framework. And it seems to me that what you're talking about is that we need to be much more solution-centric, and product will take care of itself. Am I even on the right track?
100%. I think our industry got so, for lack of a better analogy, we kind of got stuck staring at our navel and not focusing on actually what our clients wanted, right? We're like, this benchmark and that, it could be that. Our clients just want to know that they are on their path to a dignified retirement, that they can outlive their money in a safe and respectful way. And that is the solutions conversation. That's what resonates with our clients.
Wonderful. Another question came in about the fee compression. And I mean, we can talk more about that if you like, but do you believe that somehow we'll create solutions and services that plan sponsors are willing to pay more for? Or do you think these are just table stakes that we just have to do more for less? Maybe I'll add a little bit of my own thought just really quickly. Part of this is really the easy way for the intermediaries to go out there and say, hey, I can get this for you for a lower price. So the intermediary has been enablers to keep going down and down and down. But I think one of the unintended consequences is that we have less choice. We are willing to take on less risk. But anyways, I expanded on that question, but the basic bottom line is that where do you see this fee compression? Do we come to an end of this and start going backwards?
So, I mean, it's a tough one. I would actually argue both from a record keeping as well as an investment product. The easiest thing for any regulator to focus on is fees, right? Because I can compare A to B. Now when I have to start going into capabilities and services and offerings, that gets kind of gray. So why don't we just stay focused on fees? And I think it's a disservice. It's a disservice to our clients. Fees are important, no question. But I'm going to use my analogy on active versus passive, right? And what I say is, hey, we've had a decade of central banks pumping money into the system without any inflation, interest rates zero or negative. Where else were you going to put your money? You put it in the stock market. Passive just, always outperforms in that kind of a momentum market. And I say it's like driving a car. If I said to you, Philip, get to point A to B in the cheapest way that you can get there, you're going to pick, and A to B is a well-paved straight road, you're going with the cheapest car that has no safety features on it. But if you have to go drive in the mountains and there's a snowstorm, you could fall off the cliff, right? You're going to wish you'd paid for those safety features. An investment pass always has the mountain drive with the unexpected snowstorm. And so when everybody gets so focused on just fees, the only thing you're going to do is buy that car with no safety features. Active management is risk-adjusted return. And I look at the past decade, and if anybody thinks that we're going to have the next decade is going to replicate the past, I just don't see it. I think you're going to have much greater volatility. I think there's more risk built into some of these, passive equity products. There's no buy bid on the downside. We saw that in March. And so we have to be able, you have to be able to justify your fees, but we have to be able to talk about them in such a way that people understand what they're getting. And that same thing goes for the record keeper. If you're offering value with those additional digital services, you're going to have to get paid for those things. And we need to be able to articulate that value, why it's better for clients, and push back a little bit of it should just be low cost. Because in low cost, you get what you pay for.
So the last question I see on here is, what is the catalyst of bringing active management back, which you're already talking about? And in the last 20 years, I feel bad for my kids. Last 20 years, they went through, the financial crisis, now goes through the COVID, left tail event. And just as they think they were safe to get out of the water, they are back in the water again, so to speak. If these things don't help us to understand and appreciate the importance of having somebody driving the train, right, or driving the car, having you get the right person to get into active management, what else are we going to have to experience to really bring active management back in a meaningful way?
I think Melody Hobson of Ariel Capital gave a great analogy, which I'm going to use here because I think it really is important. So pilots, when there's really rough weather and turbulence, they turn off autopilot because autopilot can't adjust and they have to go manual. When there are turbulent markets, you want somebody controlling the investment decisions. You absolutely do. And again, there's no buy bid on passive on the downside. And we're going to have a period of volatility. I think that's absolutely. I just think you have to, as we absorb and digest all of the decisions that have been made over the last decade to help out, that's going to take some digestion. And it's going to be important to have an active manager who is really steering the ship. And what we've learned from clients, they want to do well on the upside. But boy, what really, really gets them is when they think, we saw this in 2008, they think they could retire because they've got this great nest egg, and suddenly overnight it drops 50%. Like, they don't even know how to adjust that, and they feel like we have done such a disservice. And that's where having somebody controlling the ship to understand things and on that risk-adjusted return is so, so important. We cannot forget that clients panic when there is a massive downside. We have to provide downside protection.
So if I may wrap those two pieces together and say, basically, if we can have the right solution, such as a managed account, and I don't want to overstate managed account, but that idea of portfolio construction and being responsive to one's lifetime goals, with the right allocation algorithm, and having the individual advice, which will help them to understand how it is relevant to them, and then having the building blocks that are thoughtful, that have downside protection, should give us a much better outcome. In other words, Muhammad Al-Arian used to say that it's a very bumpy road, but we try to make it as less bumpy to get to your destination as we can. And I think, am I summarizing what you are thinking correctly?
Absolutely. You said it better than me.
No. Let me see. Any other questions? I don't see any other questions. I think our time is almost up. Jenny, any other wonderful wisdom that you can share? You've shared a lot of wonderful wisdom to us from your experience, your personal experience, and we already greatly appreciate. But if you have others to share with us, please feel free to do so.
No, I mean, I just, again, Philip, I think that what you're doing at Spark, I mean, it's so important, and to all the record keepers. I mean, I know I ran a technology department. It's tough business, man, being there, being the service provider. It can be a thankless job. I used to say to the ops and tech group, a good day is when nobody's complaining. It's complicated for the utility company to get the energy into your home, but when nobody turns on the light switch and says they did it again today. So, just appreciate all that you guys do, and we're on the right side of this as far as the importance of getting people to save and think about their retirement early. And so, as we all are on this journey of trying to make that happen, I think it's critical.
So, Jenny, thank you so much for being our opening keynote speaker. Thank you for accepting my invitation. You are so gracious, and you are so warm, and I appreciate it so much. You have set the tone for many of the sessions over the next 3 days. Very, very best to you and everyone at Franklin Templeton in driving your vision and your mission forward. With that, we will continue our discussion with Jenny, I think in whatever room that we're supposed to go to, but we will go there virtually. And so thank you again to everyone, and thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.